The cottonmouth's fangs were 6 inches from the deaf girl's hand when a rock flew out of the darkness, thrown by a ghost who'd been living in the biker's barn for 3 weeks, stealing parts to build something that would make doctors look like fools. What came out of that glowing box would make a grown man drop to his knees and weep. Before we dive in, where are you watching this from? Drop your city in the comments right now. I want to see how far this story reaches. And if you believe in second chances and the power of family, hit that subscribe button. Now let's get into the story. The wrench slipped. Matty Byron's knuckles cracked against the exhaust pipe of his 72 shovel head, splitting skin, drawing blood. He didn't flinch. Pain was just another language he'd learned to speak fluently over 43 years of hard living. He wiped the grease and blood on his jeans and reached back into the engine's guts, feeling for the bolt that had been fighting him for the past 20 minutes. The Oklahoma sun beat down on the tin roof of his barn like a punishment, turning the air thick enough to chew. Sweat carved rivers through the motor oil on his forearms, following the black ink of his tattoos, skulls, chains, the grinning Reaper that marked him as president of the Red Dirt Reapers MC. The V-twin engine on his workbench roared to life under his hands, a sound like God clearing his throat. Violent, beautiful, loud. Matty lived for noise. He twisted the throttle, and the engine screamed, rattling tools off the pegboard. The kind of thunder that made men step aside and women take notice. The kind of sound that announced you were coming and dared anyone to do something about it. But when he looked up, his daughter didn't turn around. Elaine sat 20 yards away in the dirt, her yellow Sunday dress already brown at the hem. 7 years old, hair like honey in the brutal sunlight, building something with rocks and sticks that only she understood. Matty killed the engine. The silence that followed felt like drowning. She didn't notice. She never did. He watched her small hands arrange the stones in careful patterns, her lips moving in some song or story that he would never hear her sing aloud. The specialist in Tulsa had used words like profound and irreversible and auditory nerve death. Words that cost $500 an appointment to hear. Words that meant his little girl lived behind glass, trapped in a world he couldn't reach. Matty grabbed a rag, wiping his hands, his eyes never leaving Elaine. She had his late wife's smile, the same stubborn set to her jaw when she concentrated. Sarah had been gone 3 years now. Breast cancer that moved fast and mean, and Elaine was all he had left. The cottonmouth saw her before he did. It was thick as Matty's forearm, coiled in the shadow of the barn's foundation, maybe 6 feet from where Elaine was reaching for another rock. The snake's head lifted, tongue testing the air, body tensing into that unmistakable S-curve. Elaine! The word tore out of Matty's throat, loud enough to wake the dead, loud enough to make the windows rattle. His daughter kept playing. Time fractured. Matty's boots hit the ground running, every muscle in his body screaming forward, but he was 30 feet away, and the snake was right there, and Elaine was reaching, her small hand extending toward the shadow where death waited with hollow fangs. Baby, stop. Nothing. She couldn't hear him. She would never hear him. The snake's mouth opened wide, and then something else moved in the darkness of the barn. Something that had been watching. A rock whistled past Matty's head. It hit the cottonmouth mid-strike, snapping its head sideways, sending the snake's body thrashing into the weeds. Matty's heart hammered as he scooped Elaine up, spinning to see where the throw had come from. The barn's hayloft. A shadow pulled back from the opening. Someone had been watching. Someone had just saved his daughter's life. Matty set Elaine down near the house, signing frantically for her to stay, then turned back to the barn. His hand instinctively went to the .45 tucked in his waistband. He'd been president of the Reapers long enough to know that favors always came with a price, and strangers didn't hide in your barn unless they wanted something, or were running from something worse. He noticed things going missing for weeks now. Small things at first, a handful of zip ties, a roll of electrical tape. Then bigger items. His spare spark plugs. A coil of copper wiring he'd been saving. 3 vacuum tubes from an old radio he was restoring. Even his good soldering iron had vanished last Tuesday. Maddie had figured it was one of the younger prospects trying to build their own chopper on the cheap. Maybe Cage, or that kid from Stillwater with the tweaker eyes. But prospects didn't throw rocks with that kind of precision. Prospects didn't move like ghosts. He entered the barn slow, letting his eyes adjust to the gloom. The smell of hay and motor oil and old leather. His tools hung on the pegboard, gaps where things used to be. The concrete floor was scattered with metal shavings that hadn't been there yesterday. "I know you're up there." His voice echoed in the rafters. "Come down. Now." Silence. Then, a creak of old wood. A boot scraping against a beam. Maddie's hand tightened on his pistol. "I said now." The kid dropped from the loft like he'd done it 1,000 times, landing in a crouch 15 feet away. Maybe 12 years old, all elbows and sharp angles, wearing a gray t-shirt 3 sizes too big. But it was his face that stopped Maddie cold. Black grease smeared across both cheeks. Under his eyes. Paint. The boy's hands were empty, but his pockets bulged with something. His eyes, they were old eyes, the kind that had seen things no kid should see, locked onto Maddie's gun hand, calculating distances, escape routes. He ran, fast like a coyote heading for the back door. But halfway there he stumbled, grabbing his stomach, face going pale. Hunger. The kid's body betrayed him, legs folding, and Maddie had him by the collar before he could recover. "Easy, easy." Maddie flipped the kid around, expecting to find stolen cash or a bag of pills. Instead, the boy was clutching a soldering iron in one hand. In the other, a piece of paper, a grease-stained Sonic burger wrapper with a diagram drawn on it in careful pencil lines. Circuits. Wave patterns. Mathematical equations that made Maddie's head hurt. The kid wasn't a thief. He was a builder. "What the hell is this?" Maddie demanded, but the boy just stared at him with those ancient eyes and pointed one trembling finger past Maddie's shoulder, toward Elaine, who was peeking around the barn door. And then the kid opened his mouth and no sound came out. The kid's lips moved, but nothing came out. Not a whisper, not a breath, just silence shaped like words. Maddie released the boy's collar, confusion replacing anger. "You can't talk." The kid shook his head, then pulled up his sleeve. Cigarette burns dotted his forearm in neat rows, deliberate, like someone had been teaching a lesson. Below that, older scars, belt marks, knuckle prints. The boy's story was written on his skin in a language Maddie knew too well. "Foster system. Had to be. How long you been hiding in my barn?" Maddie asked, softer now. The kid held up 3 fingers, then made a walking motion with 2 fingers. 3 weeks. Maddie's jaw tightened. 3 weeks he'd been working 10 feet below a starving child and never knew it. The boy suddenly dropped to his knees, hands pressed together, begging. His eyes darted to the road, terrified, then back to Maddie. "Please don't call them. Please." "Kid, I gotta." Maddie pulled out his cell phone, thumb hovering over the sheriff's number. This wasn't his problem. The system would handle it. That's what the system was for. The boy's face crumpled. He lunged forward, grabbing Maddie's arm, shaking his head violently. Then he pointed at Elaine again, this time jabbing his finger repeatedly, desperately trying to communicate something. "What about my daughter?" Maddie growled. The kid scrambled to the workbench, snatched up a heavy wrench, and slammed it against the metal support pipe. The sound rang out like a church bell, sharp and metallic, echoing through the barn. Elaine didn't turn. The boy hit it again. Harder. Maddie was about to stop him when Elaine's head lifted. She looked toward the barn, curious. She didn't hear that, Maddie said. She can't. But the kid was shaking his head, grinning now through the grease war paint. He hit the pipe a third time, and Elaine stood up, walking toward them. Not because she heard it, because she felt it. The vibration traveling through the ground, through the barn's frame, through her bones. The boy pointed at the schematic in his hand, then at Elaine, then at the pile of stolen parts stacked in the corner of the loft. Not just random scrap. Vacuum tubes, copper coils, a motorcycle's magneto, pieces of something impossible. He wasn't building a machine to sell. He was building a machine to save her. And from the wild genius burning in those old eyes, Maddie suddenly realized the kid might actually know what the hell he was doing. The boy reached into the shadows and pulled out a wooden cigar box. It was glowing. Light poured from the seams of the cigar box like liquid gold. Not metaphor, not imagination. Actual light, warm and amber, pulsing in rhythm with a low hum that Maddie could feel in his back teeth. The vacuum tubes inside glowed like miniature suns, casting shadows that danced across the boy's war-painted face. What the hell, Maddie breathed. The kid, this nameless ghost who'd been stealing his parts and living like an animal in the rafters, held the box like it was the Holy Grail. And maybe it was. The sun had begun its descent behind the Oklahoma plains, turning everything the color of old whiskey. Golden hour. Magic hour. The kind of light that made you believe in things you'd stopped believing in years ago. Elaine walked closer, drawn by the glow. The grease marks on her face from playing in the dirt made her look like the boy's mirror image. Two children. Two cast-offs that the world had written off as broken. Maddie's hand shot out, blocking her. Hold on. But the kid was already moving, dropping to his knees in the dirt, so he was eye level with Elaine. He opened the box wider, and Maddie saw it clearly now. A nest of copper wiring twisted around motorcycle ignition coils, vacuum tubes salvaged from that old radio, and at the center, something that looked like a modified speaker pad wrapped in leather. The boy's hands moved with surgical precision, adjusting dials no bigger than shirt buttons. The hum changed frequency, deeper now, resonating in Maddie's chest like the bass line of a Harley-Ed idol. Kid, if this hurts her, the threat died in Maddie's throat because the boy was looking at him with those ancient eyes, and they weren't scared anymore. They were certain. Maddie dropped to one knee, the gravel biting through his jeans. He was president of the Red Dirt Reapers. He'd faced down rival clubs with guns drawn. He'd buried brothers and enemies and the only woman he'd ever loved. But in this moment, watching a mute 12-year-old reach toward his daughter with a glowing box of stolen parts, he felt more helpless than he'd ever been in his life. The boy bypassed Elaine's ears completely. He pressed the leather pad against the bone behind her right ear, just below the skull. The connection point. The place where doctors said nothing lived anymore. For 3 heartbeats, nothing happened. Then Elaine's eyes went wide. Her mouth opened. Her hands flew up to cover it, fingers splayed, shock written across every muscle in her small body. Not pain. Not fear, recognition. The Oklahoma wind kicked up dust devils in the yard, rustling through the cottonwoods. The barn door creaked on ancient hinges. Somewhere in the distance, a truck backfired on the county road. And Elaine heard it. She heard it all. A sound came out of her then, raw, sharp, hers. Half laugh, half sob. Her hands dropped from her mouth, reaching for the boy for Maddie, for the impossible thing that was happening. Maddie's vision blurred. Grown men didn't cry. Presidents didn't cry. He was crying. Daddy. The word was rough, unpracticed, beautiful. The first word she'd ever spoken that she could actually hear herself say. And then the sound of motorcycles roared up the driveway. At least 6 of them, and Maddie knew his brothers had arrived early for church. 6 Harleys thundered into the yard, kicking up red Oklahoma dust. The Reapers killed their engines in unison, boots hitting gravel, and froze at the sight before them. Their president, Matty Byron, the man who'd once broken a rival's jaw for disrespecting the patch, was on his knees in the dirt, weeping like a child. And standing next to him was a skinny kid with grease-war paint, holding a glowing wooden box. "What the hell, Press?" Cage called out. Matty looked up, tears cutting tracks through the motor oil on his face. "She can hear," he choked out. "My baby girl can hear." Elaine laughed then, high and clear and perfect, and the sound hit those hard men like a freight train. 2 of them took off their sunglasses. One of them coughed and turned away. The kid tried to step back, to disappear into the shadows again, but Maddie's hand shot out and held him firm. "Not going anywhere," Maddie growled. The social worker showed up 3 days later, clipboard in hand, county sedan parked by the gate. A thin woman with tired eyes and a badge that said Child Protective Services. "We've had reports of a runaway." Maddie stepped out of the barn. Behind him, 10 Reapers lined up, arms crossed, cuts gleaming in the sun. An army. "You got the wrong address. Sir, we have reason to believe. No kid here but my daughter and my son." Maddie's voice carried the weight of finality. "And if you come back, we'll have a different kind of conversation." The woman looked at the wall of leather and ink and steel, then back at her sedan. She got in. She left. She didn't come back. That evening, as the sun set once more over the plains, Maddie stood before Jimmy in the barn. The Reapers formed a circle. In Maddie's hands, his own leather vest, the one with President stitched across the back. He draped it over the boy's thin shoulders. It swallowed him whole. "Welcome home, kid." Jimmy smiled. The first real smile anyone had ever seen on that war-painted face, and climbed on a Maddie shovelhead. No longer a ghost. No longer a runaway. Family. Because blood gets you born, but oil and loyalty make you a brother. If you believe that family isn't defined by blood, but by who shows up when the world says it's impossible, smash that like button and share this story with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe now for more stories. Also, check out the 2 videos showing on the screen right now. They're specially crafted for you.